Wish TV. All Indiana Politics
is your premier source for Indiana politics.
Focusing on issues that matter to you.
In-depth, nonpartisan coverage, exclusive interviews with Indiana's political leaders, expert analysis on critical legislation. From Wish TV, this is All Indiana Politics Podcast on the All Indiana Podcast Network. Your day moves fast. Your news should too. That's why there's a new and improved Wish TV app, bringing you more local news, breaking alerts, live streaming, weather forecast, radar, and Indiana sports, all in one place. Customize your news feed to see the stories that matter most to you and get the information you need when you need it. Download the new and improved Wish TV app today on iOS or Android and take News 8 with you everywhere.
Don't let high golf rates drive you out of bounds. Save big with the Wish TV Great Golf Club Card.
Central Indiana's largest golf club card membership is back for the 8th season with more courses than ever before. Save over 75% on tee times at 27 Central Indiana golf courses. All you need is the Wish TV Great Golf Club Card. Cards are valid for the entire 2026 golf season.
Great courses, great savings. Score your Great Golf Club Card today.
And welcome back to another episode of All Indiana Politics Conversations. I'm Garrett Bergquist, the producer of All Indiana Politics, and joining me once again is State Senator Andrea Hunley. Senator, welcome back.
Thank you so much for having me.
So in part one of our conversation, we talked about your early life growing up in Fort Wayne, your experience attending a magnet school actually growing up, and your background is as an educator. So I want to talk about that in part two here. What first drew you to teaching?
Well, I have a lot of teachers in my extended family. My mom is one of 10. And when I was in elementary school, my grandma actually, she went and got her driver's license. Then she decided to go to college, and she wanted to become a teacher. This is all happening while I'm an elementary school student. And so I'll never forget, my grandma was student teaching at my school where I was a student, and I thought it was so cool. I would tell all my friends, that's my grandma, that's my grandma. And she was my hero. I just thought it was so cool that she wanted to teach after having 10 kids, by the way. And so I got to see a lot of classroom learning and things like that through her lens. And I just loved teaching, and I loved learning. I loved school. And so then I decided that that's what I wanted to do.
So you'd settled on this very, very early in life. Tell me about, first going off to college, going through education school. Was this more of a, okay, yes, this is absolutely what I want to do?
Yes. So I originally started off college wanting to be a journalism teacher. My husband and I actually met in our high school journalism class, story for another day, but I love journalism, love writing, love reading. And as I went to university, one of the counselors said, there's probably not going to be print journalism by the time you graduate. Now, this was early 2000. How offensive, but also probably true at the time that they saw the writing on the wall with where print journalism has gone. And so the counselor encouraged me to switch to English education. And so that's what I did. So I became a high school English teacher, and I taught at Ben Davis on the city's west side. And then I decided to get my administration license as well. And I got my, I started being an assistant principal in Washington Township. And then I was recruited into IPS, and that's where I spent the bulk of my education career, 11 years as a principal of an elementary and middle school.
Tell me about your first teaching job.
I loved teaching at Ben Davis. And in fact, I'm still close with so many of my students from my first years of teaching. They are now in their 30s and early 40s and have kids of their own and jobs of their own. But being a teacher, starting off at 22, my goodness, it was tough. I mean, one of my classes, I had students from 3 rival gangs all in one class. And I had to learn how to keep the peace, how to teach, and how to make sure that young people knew that when they came in my classroom, they were safe, but also I meant business. And so I learned to develop relationships with young people and then listen to them. And I learned a lot those early years. I also decided to get my license to teach English as a new language. So while I was teaching at Ben Davis, I had many, many students who were their mother tongue was a language other than English. And I realized I wanted to make sure that I was reaching them. So I had students who were coming from Somalia, who were coming from West Africa, who were coming from many places in Latin America, all over the world. And I wanted to make sure that I was giving them the best experience because I knew that, they only have 4 years in high school and then they're off, to their future, to the workforce, to university, to whatever there is that they wanted to pursue next. And I knew that literacy was going to be a really important part to setting them up for the future. And so I came home one day and I was expecting our first child. And I told my husband, I think I want to go to grad school. And he said, like, you're going to stop working? I said, no. I want to keep working and go to grad school to get my license to teach English as a new language. And thank goodness my husband is so supportive because those were a wild couple of years. Then we had 2 kids under 2. I was in grad school and working full time as a teacher. But I wanted to make sure that I was serving my students, my kids at work in the best way possible.
So you talked about getting your license to teach English as a new language. What are some things that you learned as you were working with these students, teaching them English and also trying to navigate their identity as immigrants in the United States, immigrants who did not speak English as their native language? One
of the things that sticks with me is that the difference between learning academic language and learning conversational language, right? So you might see a kid in the cafeteria or in the hallway who seems to be carrying on conversations in English, and you would think to yourself, oh, well, they know the language, but that's very different. Saying what's up to somebody, what'd you do this weekend? That's very different than analyzing Shakespeare and the language that's required to do that. And so learning that, how to help young people bridge that language gap between conversational language and academic language was really important. And then also helping their peers understand that just because a person might be struggling to communicate the thoughts in their head doesn't mean that they're not thinking critically about the information, right? That there is not a relationship between my ability to speak and my ability to think critically. And so that was also really important, is just getting the peers to understand that, folks who maybe struggle with a language doesn't mean that they, struggle with having incredibly deep and complex thoughts or ideas or an ability to problem solve. And that, quite frankly, it is an incredible skill to be able to navigate an area without being able to fully, understand a language.
How did you go from the teaching role into the administrative role, ultimately working your way up to being a principal?
Well, I decided I just needed to be in charge because there were things that I saw that were happening that, I kept thinking to myself, like, well, if I were in charge, I would do, well, if I were in charge, it just happened often. And so I started to take on more and more leadership roles. My second year of teaching, I was the team lead over 10 different teachers in the English department, leading our English 10 curriculum. And so I just started to take on, more and more leadership roles in the school, in the district, and then across the state. And I was encouraged to get my administrator license. And I'm glad that I did, but I didn't think I would go into administration right away. I thought, well, I'll just keep this in my back pocket for one day when I'm ready. And, we make plans and God laughs, and that's what happened. And the next thing I knew, I was an elementary school assistant principal.
What was that like?
Oh, my goodness. Now, mind you, I was trained to teach high schoolers who already know how to tie their shoes and wipe their noses and manage most conflicts. So coming into an elementary building, I was terrified of the kids and sometimes their parents. And I learned a lot very fast about how to manage young people, but then also how to work with adults who had way more knowledge than I did. I did not have expertise in how to teach a second grader how to read. I did not have expertise in how to teach fifth graders complex mathematics, right? That is not where my expertise lied. And so it was interesting being in a leadership position, but not having all of the knowledge and working to navigate what that means. And it means building out a really good team. It means being willing to ask questions, and it means willing to get it wrong, reflect, and then move on. So I learned a lot in my time as an assistant principal, and I had an incredible leader, Mr. Pomeranke, who is just a rock star. He was an administrator for decades in Washington Township and really trained me well.
Central Indiana. Wish TV is now live on YouTube TV and Hulu Live, offering more hours of local programming than any other station. Search for Wish TV or look for CW8 on both YouTube TV and Hulu Live to find us. Watch local news, sports, and lifestyle shows live from Wish TV. You can still catch Wish TV free over the air or stream it live on wishtv.com and on the free Wish TV mobile apps. Wish TV, available in more places for the latest news, weather, and sports.
And then you eventually became a principal within IPS. Tell me how that came about.
Yes. At the time, they were looking for a new principal for one of the Center for Inquiry schools. And I had a heart for inquiry-based instruction. And those schools were kindergarten through 8th grade. And so I'd already had experience working both at the elementary level and then at the high school level. I wanted someone who understood that continuum and how it's connected. And so at the time, when I was 26 years old, becoming a principal of an award-winning school, I was one of the youngest administrators in the entire state. And I, again, learned a lot on the job from people with much more expertise than I had. But I loved working in that building, and I was with that staff for 11 years.
What are some big lessons that you recall from that time?
Definitely learning how to make tough decisions and how to make them in a way that allows folks to have a voice, but also knowing that ultimately the buck stopped with me. I would listen to the parents, listen to the teachers, listen to the students, and so they knew that their voices were heard, and they didn't love every decision that I made, but my goal was to help them understand the why behind it. And that is a challenge. But when you hold the weight of decisions that can truly be life-altering for young people, it requires a level of confidence and also, an ability to look at the big picture, to zoom out and to see how, the dominoes of one decision today could really impact the outcome for a young person's life. Things like whether or not a child should be retained, should be held back in a classroom, right? That's a really, really big choice that can shift the outcome for them. Whether or not a child should be up for expulsion from school because of a decision that they made. Things like that, what consequences are for discipline. And then also same for staff. There were, tough hiring decisions and firing decisions that I had to make, and learning that, I can do hard things and that I know how to stick to my own morals and values, and then also make sure that I hold other people to a really high standard, both kids and adults.
Can you give me a couple examples of some particularly difficult decisions you had to make as a principal, and what are some things that you took away from that you applied later?
Well, those human resources decisions are confidential.
Yeah, obviously, without getting into confidential stuff.
Yes. But there were, several things. I think that in addition to kind of the personnel challenges or student academic or disciplinary challenges, I think that, the other piece is managing the entire budget, right? We have a tight budget. It was a multi-million-dollar budget, $4 million, but that's to staff, a staff of 50, and then also serve 500 students and their families. It's when you break it down, it's not a lot of money. And so I had to make some really tough decisions about, whether or not we were going to be able to afford to teach both Spanish and Mandarin, whether we were going to be able to maintain having, PE X amount of days a week for all students, things like that, whether or not we could afford to have a social worker full time, or if we needed to have a nurse, or, what that looks like. And again, those decisions have an impact on the ability to provide services and, and staff morale, all over the place, just a lot of things. But the budgeting piece, definitely a challenge. And you never have enough resources. So it also just takes a creative approach in finding, other partners outside of the school building to help supplement that budget as well.
I want to return to a point that we discussed at some length in our first part, and that's the idea of community. And you brought up the whole issue of neighborhood schools, being able to go to school with your friends. What are some things that working in a school, first as a teacher and then as a principal, taught you about community and how communities work and interact?
The school that I was principal of downtown was so interesting because I had, folks who lived and worked downtown. Maybe they worked at Lilly or Cummins or Salesforce, and they're, young people to the school that I was at. And then we also had young people who lived in our transitional housing or shelter systems who were also sending their young people to the school. And then there were folks who maybe were working at the university, and so who are only going to be here for a short amount of time. So we had this, mix of families who maybe otherwise wouldn't get the opportunity to be in the same room. But when we were having a school event or, a band concert or a play or coming together to have a parent association meeting, everyone was a parent. They were on an equal playing field. It didn't matter where you rested your head at night. It didn't matter how much money was in your bank account. This is all a community, and everybody was there because they care about their children and they care about their children's educational outcomes. And there aren't very many places in a society where that's true, where you have people from such diverse backgrounds all coming together as you do in a public school. And I think that's one of the reasons why I am so hell-bent on making sure that we protect public schools, because they are one of the last bastions of our community where you actually get neighbors to be in community together that supersedes, again, socioeconomic lines, racial lines, all of the different ways, faith lines, all of the different ways that communities can be divided.
Were you still a building administrator during the COVID-19 pandemic?
Heaven help us. Oh, yes. And that was so hard. In fact, there was a book that the Indianapolis Public Schools that they gave to us as principals, and it was called Leading During Turbulent Times. And I think about that often because we were leading in a time of rapid change. I mean, there was not a time where there were more significant shifts in the way that we did learning and the way that we did technology and the way that we did staffing and the way that we did communicating to families and the way that we taught. I mean, can you imagine trying to train 55-year-olds on how to use Zoom for the first time and set up those protocols around that? It was so challenging. And then we also had to figure out, how do we make sure that every family has a device and that they have access to Wi-Fi? I think that we forget now what all of that was like. And it looked like me and one other staff member driving to people's homes with little Verizon hotspots and then, kind of tossing it to them at the door, standing, 12 feet away, and then explaining to people how to use them. And during that time, I also, because we mailed students some of their devices, but not all of our students had mailing addresses. And during that time, I got to see the grave disparities that still exist in housing here in Indianapolis. I will never forget one of the places that we went to deliver a computer did not have electricity. This is a home that was charging rent. I still cannot believe this. They had a dirt floor, the roof is collapsing, and there's no electricity and there's no running water in an entire complex. This wasn't just one home. This is an entire complex. And everyone was in that same position, but they felt like there were no rights as tenants for them to withhold their rent. They're still paying rent. And there was nowhere for them to turn to say, we need things to be different. And so not only now are we delivering devices, but now I'm trying to figure out, okay, how do we make sure that their water gets turned on? How do we make sure that they've got food? Are we delivering? And so during COVID, it was an all hands on deck approach to make sure that we were supporting families. And, shout out to, every single teacher who went above and beyond. And even my own parents. It was all hands on deck. My mom was packing boxes with gleaners and driving them to families' homes from school. We had a whole route of homes where we were distributing food boxes. And, it was a challenging time, but I also saw our power to shift and our power to be innovative and our power to come together as a community and do things quickly. I think so often change happens so slowly. And in that time, we just didn't have time. We didn't have time for bureaucracy to be in the way of doing what was necessary.
What were some of the key lessons that you took away from that specific time?
I really think that it was the ability to do whatever it takes to help in every way that we can. And, the community became really creative in our ways to support folks. But I also think that there was this mutual respect that happened between employers in their respect for the role of schools to support their employees and their employees' children. I think that there was a respect that happened between parents and educators to parents, each respecting, the role they play. I think that there was this new understanding for the role that really communities play in working together to make sure that, that families are taken care of.
Pretty good place to leave off there, because at that point we're starting to get into your political career, your decision to run in 2022. So we will talk about that in part 3. For now, Senator Hunley, thank you once again.
Thank you.
From Wish TV, this is All Indiana Politics Podcast on the All Indiana Podcast Network. Watch All Indiana Politics live Sunday mornings at 9:30 on Wish TV and at wishtv.com. Subscribe to this podcast and listen weekly here on the All Indiana Podcast Network. And be sure to discover even more great podcasts at allindianapodcastnetwork.com.